Hello everyone, it's GigaBeef here, and today we'll be going through the best armors at classes 2, 3 and 4 for patch 0.13. Let's do a quick refresher of the important details about how armor works. If you're totally familiar with this, then feel free to skip to the next chapter. So in terms of protection, each armor has a class, a current and maximum durability, and a material. When a bullet hits armor, class is the most important element first, as this determines the penetration chance, i.e. whether the armor works to prevent the bullet from going through or not. Roughly speaking, as a rule of thumb, the penetration of your bullets needs to be about 10 times the armor class to give a strong chance of penetrating, such as 40 pen versus class 4, 30 pen versus class 3, and so on. This gives a 90% probability of defeating that armor and hitting your opponent properly at close ranges. After a bullet has struck the armor, its current durability becomes damaged. This affects the penetration chance for the next hit received, making it more likely to go through, and another rule of thumb is that an armor becomes functionally the same as the class below at 40% of its maximum durability. So for example, a class 4 at 20 out of 50 durability would act similarly to a class 3 at 100% on the next hit from a penetration chance perspective. An important thing to note at this point, if you repair an armor, the current durability is always compared to the original maximum durability. So a repaired 30 out of 30 armor with 50 original maximum is the same as a 30 out of 50 for purposes of calculating penetration. We also have material. This is important because the durability number that you see in-game is not enough to compare between the armors properly. This is because the material affects the destructibility number, which is a modifier that reduces the amount of armor damage dealt by bullets when they hit, practically increasing the durability more than you would expect. This destructibility figure can vary quite dramatically, so to compare armors like for like, you need to take the actual durability figure that we see in game and divide it by this destructibility number to get what we call the effective durability, which allows for the armors to be compared between each other fairly. Let's get started with class 2, the entry level armors. People never normally use these for long, but I'm of the opinion that they're still useful if you are choosing between something and nothing, because it prevents you getting one-tapped by shotguns and two-tapped by some pistol ammo. There are only 4 armors in here, the Packer and the Packer Rivals, which is just a special event version that can appear in the loot pool sometimes and is heavier for no apparent reason, the Module 3M and the 6B2 Flora. These actually all have really high effective durability because of the material types, with Aramid in particular being the best for this, and they all have super low debuffs. The cheapest is the Module 3M on the flea market, often below 20k and super cheap to repair, but it is white, so it's not the most tactical colour. On balance, the regular Packer is technically the best armour of the 3 with the highest effective durability of 200, lowest move and turn rates, and the lowest weight. It's also purchasable at Ragman 1 for both 30k in cash or a barter for 3 lower half masks. The only reason why you might want to use the 6B2 Flora is for the camo. On to class 3. Here we have 5 armour vests and 1 armoured rig. Class 3 will protect you up to around 30 penetration, so all shotgun buckshot and all but specialist armor-piercing pistol rounds and low-grade rifle cartridges. The best bullet that it still works against is probably 45 match FMJ with 25 penetration, but unfortunately for class 3 this wipe, M855 from the 5.56 caliber and PS rounds for 5.45 AKs were both buffed to 30 and 31 pen respectively, which really easily deals with it. The Dr. Disrespect version of the Packer at class 3 is by far the most protective, again because Aramid is an amazing material from a destructibility perspective, giving it 240 effective durability, and with super low debuffs to move, turn and ergo, along with being 4 kilograms, makes it the best class 3 armor. You do have to get it from the flea though, as it's an in-raid spawning item, but it is relatively cheap due to the fact that it just isn't class 4. Our first rig, the 6B516 Ulay, not to be confused with the 6B515, which is a class 4 that we'll talk about later on, is available from Ragman 1 and is the best protection that you can get at the start, costing 57k, which is fairly expensive for players under level 15. However, it does negate the need for a regular rig because it has an internal storage space on its own, which makes it slightly cheaper by at least 10,000 rubles. Outside of barters, this is the only class 3 that is directly purchasable by players without the flea market, so if you have the money, it is the optimal choice if the alternative is class 2. From the rest of them, once you have the flea market, the Coraza is technically the next best, although often too expensive, so usually the Juk 3 Press is a cheaper choice and nearly as effective. A barter that is very useful early on is the propane tank for the 6B23-1 armor. As this is steel, it repairs super well too, so when it comes back in insurance, you can take it back out again with limited downside. Later on, the propane tanks get expensive because of the fuel barter and they become cheaper on the flea market. On to class 4. This is where the protection starts to get pretty decent. Requiring 40 pen to get through consistently prevents a lot of different ammunition from being as effective, and even those such as PP and M856A1 with 36 and 37 pen respectively have a 50-50 chance to be absorbed. It's also important to remember that the pen and damage values of bullets drop off over distance too, so some of these rounds that are reasonably effective up close can become unviable against Class 4 armor over longer ranges. Within Class 4, there is a fairly defined split between the armors that are available at Ragman 2, those at Ragman 3, and those on the flea market. At level 15, you can technically access the best Class 4 by durability, which is the High-Com Trooper. This is find in raid only, for example looted in stashes or from AI such as rogues and raiders, and has 189 effective durability, which is incredible for this class. It has pretty decent debuffs and is light as well. The only potential real downside to it is the lack of stomach protection. Some players prefer this as it keeps your armor for more serious thorax shots only without degrading the durability, but with leg meta becoming more prevalent, especially with all the ammo changes we've seen, it can be extremely dangerous to raid without it. As a reminder, the stomach increases damage by 50% once it is blacked out, so against ammo like Magnum Buckshot, this can literally get you killed in a single hit in theory. The Trooper is expensive, typically costing between 100 and 120k, but against the bullets that it works against, the high durability keeps the percentage chance of penetration nice and low even after multiple shots. Two rigs that are accessible on the fleet as well is the ANA Tactical M2 and M1 rigs. The M2 is superior to the M1 on durability due to the titanium material, and both include stomach protection as well. Both are usually well over 100k like the Trooper on the flea market, and because they are rigs they have internal space too. The M1 is slightly larger on the inside and has two very useful 2x2 slots as well, which are great for looting those bigger items. Are these worth the money? Well, perhaps if you're specifically PvP questing and want to maximize your chance of success, but unless you're in a successful squad where you lose gear infrequently, I don't think I'd use them as my regular go-to. However, we'll revisit these again at Ragman 3. At the bottom of Class 4 but allowed on the flea still, we have the 6B 3TM rig, the NFM Thor, and 3 ceramic armors with lower durability. All of these do actually have similar effective durability and will get eroded pretty quickly when shot, although the Thor has way lower debuffs than the others, so can actually be a bit better. You can repair the 6B3 and the Thor modestly when they get returned, which is where the final 3 ceramic armors fall down. They can be good for a single run if cheap on the fleet, but don't expect them to last for a long time. Despite all of the downsides, the cheapest Class 4 that you can buy is normally the 6B5 Ulay at around 50k, which as it comes with the rig 2 is a way to sneak into the class on a budget. Now, Ragman 2 opens up a few more possibilities. In the past, the 6B 3TM was in fact the armor most frequently used here, but since it was nerfed to 70k cost rather than 55, this has made life more difficult, not to mention that you can only buy one per trader reset now. There is a new barter for this at Ragman 2 as well, effectively increasing the number that you can get to 2, and this usually costs 70k as well. Interestingly, Jaeger 2 opens up the barter for the 6B5 Ulay, so if you were looking to cheap out for 3 soap and 4 toilet paper, you can get one of these per Jaeger reset as well, again for about the flea market price of 50k or so. Jaeger's reset timer is much faster than the other traders, so the 6B5 is way more available due to this than the others. Outside of this, the only other barter that makes sense at this level really is the MMAC rig. Costing around 85k, this is a nice light rig with a good internal layout and very low debuffs. With thorax only protection again, you might consider this one for maps like Woods and Lighthouse where mobility is key and leg meta stomach issues are less of a problem. At Ragman 2, you're effectively choosing between something cheap, the MMAC in the middle, or something expensive, which is either the Trooper or the ANA rigs from the fleet. Which to go for really depends on what your goals are in that particular raid as always, but now the choice is much more difficult because the cheap end of the decent Class 4s is that much more expensive. Moving up to Ragman 3, this opens up a lot of different armors, including a totally new rig, the Shellback Banshee. This sits right between the M1 and M2 rigs on durability, has good stats, low weight, plus is decent internally, and interestingly has 2 3x1 slots, so can be used with 40 round magazines. What's more, the barter is just a vase and a VHS tape, which is typically about 85 to 90k to purchase, making this a nice upgrade to the MMAC rig. The Strandhog is another one that is similar to these two, and although it has slightly less durability, it does cover the stomach as well, giving you some more options depending on what you want to do. This is the lightest Class 4 and also costs around 85k too from the barter of a sewing kit, 2 Kajura and a vodka. Now, Ragman 3 also opens up the actual barter for the ANA rigs rather than relying on the flea market. The M2 is by far my favourite as this can be really cheap, 3 round frame glasses and 3 Colpack visors, which in turn can be bartered themselves for chainlets. Chainlets are a little bit more expensive this wipe because they have a few other uses, but even at 10k each, if you get the glasses at sub 10, the whole thing can cost as little as 55,000 rubles, which is insane. The M1 barter is a little more nuanced, as 4 Aquamari and 1 Kvass right off the bat costs around 120,000 rubles, but if you buy Aquamaris and Kvass for general hydration in raid, use them down to 1 durability out of 50 and then hand them in, the value can be incredible. Finally, we have the Wartech TV110, which can also be gotten super cheaply. This is the 4th highest durability in class 4, and at Ragman 3 barters for 4 bleach and 2 shampoo, which usually comes to around 80k. This armoured rig is heavy, but it has good protection as a thorax only armour and decent stats, but the internal storage is massive on this one, which is why it's one choice for some players when they get here. So overall, early on I'd personally stick with the Packer to prevent getting buckshotted. Then when you get access to the flea market at level 15, you can start swapping between the low grade class 4s that cost around 50 to 70k depending on what comes up at the time. For more advanced missions, consider using the Trooper occasionally if your finances can support it. Once at Ragman 2 and Jaeger 2, the 6B5 Ulay and the 6B3TM are still the cheapest armors that you can get consistently from the traders if the flea is expensive, and will get the job done, but consider the MMAC now for an intermediary option with better stats. Finally, at Ragman 3, my favourite is always the ANA M2 rig for its cheapness, but the TV110, the new Banshee and the Strandhog are also solid choices. Next, go and check out my video on the changes made recently, including the price hike on the 6B3TM that we saw in this video. Otherwise, as usual, a big shout out to all my patrons, hit all the buttons if you enjoyed it, and as always, have fun in your raids.